I will invite you, Valerie. Valerie, for those who are joining us just now, is our Assistant Executive Director of WFP, and will be opening with some remarks. Over to you, Valerie.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda, and good afternoon, and welcome everybody to the 16 Days of Activism panel discussion, and it's focused on ending violence against women and girls through women's economic empowerment. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie Guarnieri. I'm WFP's Assistant Executive Director for Program Operations. And before we start, I would like to introduce the distinguished panelists joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome Astrid Holland, the Deputy Coordinator from Gender-Based Violence Area of Responsibility, Swati Mehta from FinEquity's Financial Abuse Thematic Lead, Noor Ali Badi from Call to Action Field Implementation Project and the coordinator at Baghdad Women Association, and Peter Musoko, WFP's country director in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We are delighted to have each of you here with us today and for you to share your perspective and your commitment to this important cause. Thank you so much. Now, on the topic itself, it is very unfortunate that we need to keep the world focused on the topic of gender-based violence. In 2023, a partner or family member intentionally killed a woman every 10 minutes. Still today, 1 in 3 women will be subjected to violence in their lives, and 1 in 4 girls, adolescent girls, are abused by their partner. These are horrifying statistics, and there's a critical link between gender-based violence, power, and social norms. Hence, programs which support women's economic empowerment, when carefully designed, can help reduce women's vulnerability to violence. We know that economic empowerment provides women with financial independence and decision-making power, which can help them leave abusive relationships and support themselves and their families. However, there are some risks when economic empowerment challenges come up against some power structures. And in these contexts, we see that increased violence can occur when partners feel threatened by changes in traditional roles. So we need to understand and mitigate these risks in our work. We also know that crises like natural disasters, conflicts, and pandemics have a significant impact on gender-based violence and on women's economic empowerment. These events can exacerbate gender inequalities and increase women's vulnerability to violence. Conflicts now in Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Gaza, Yemen, these have led to widespread displacement, devastating hunger crises, and alarming levels of conflict-related sexual violence. And in these contexts, inclusive financial systems and technology can play an important part in empowering women, especially in displacement contexts, where flexible digital financial services are vital for people on the move. And in a recent gender-based violence risk analysis, our teams in Lesotho found that violence against women is directly linked to disputes over the use of household finances, and that the lack of financial literacy affects women's decision-making power within their households. WFP works to promote inclusive financial mechanisms such as grants or loans on favorable terms for women-led initiatives. And one example of this is the HiSabPay cashless payment solution in Afghanistan. HiSabPay provides a secure digital platform for communities with limited banking access, even for those without smartphones. And by offering access to digital bank accounts, HiSabPay fosters women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment, allowing women to manage credit, make autonomous spending decisions, and to save. So Today and every day, the global community needs to continue to raise awareness about the relationship between gender-based violence and women's economic empowerment, including sharing evidence and insights from various programs and initiatives. So we're going to take that opportunity in this workshop to share experiences, to hear best practices from different organizations that work at the intersection of gender-based violence and women's economic empowerment. We'll explore how well-designed economic empowerment interventions can contribute to the prevention of gender-based violence, and we'll discuss the strategic focus on prioritizing women as recipients of food assistance, because we know what the impact can be when we do this well. Prioritizing women boosts economic empowerment. When more women are economically participating, local and national economies grow. Prioritizing women tackles gender inequality, which is intrinsically linked with food insecurity. Prioritizing women has wide community benefits. We know that women are more likely to invest their resources in their families, leading to better health, education, and nutritional outcomes for children. And there are important social benefits too. When women are empowered, child marriage rates fall and girls do better in school. But there are also barriers which we must overcome before we can fully realize these achievements. Cultural norms and gender biases can hinder women's access to resources and opportunities. And without effective community engagement, there can be major risks of increasing tensions and even violence. In this increasingly complex operating environment where we work, it's becoming even harder to reach the people who need our support, often even more so for women. So in closing, I just want to encourage you all to actively engage in this event. Your contributions today are really valuable. It's coming together. It's by coming together that we have an opportunity to really combat gender-based violence through economic empowerment. And each actor in the humanitarian system has a particular role to play in driving that change. I think the challenges may seem daunting, all the more so at this point in time, but experience shows that change is possible. Women's economic empowerment creates more safety for women and girls and more prosperity for all. And it's through collaboration and commitment that we can make significant strides towards ending violence against women and girls. And our efforts will only stop when there is a world without gender-based violence. Thank you so much, and looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for that great introduction, and really very clearly laying out why it's so important that we focus on this, not only during the 16 days annually where we really spotlight this, but on every day of the year and throughout all the ways in which we all are working together. I wanted to remind the audience that we do have interpretation available. So there's a little globe at the bottom of your screen with interpretation if you would like to select a different language. And also in terms of looking for your input and questions, if you could put your questions at any point in time in the chat, and tell us if you have a particular person, one of the panelists that you'd like to direct those questions to, or if it's a more open general question, and we'll try to bring those in at the end of the panel discussion. So we've heard from Valerie, our esteemed panelist, Astrid, Noor, and Swati. We have had some technical difficulties in the beginning, but I think we actually have all of them here with us now, and hopefully we can hear them clearly, and they can hear us. So really excited to have this conversation and to delve a little bit more into the details and learn from their rich experiences. So to kick us off, I wanted to turn first to Astrid. And Astrid, you know, we'd like to hear from you from your perspective and this sort of broad look at gender-based violence in humanitarian settings and your work. What are you seeing from that perspective, and how do you see women's economic empowerment intersecting with gender-based violence?
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you, Valerie. Yeah, there's a lot to say in a way. First of all, a big thank you. I'm very happy to be here because indeed, economic empowerment, livelihoods is a big part of the solution in terms of addressing GBV, both in terms of long-term and also very short-term in terms of helping survivors here and now getting out of very difficult situations or reducing their risk. And again, I will not talk so much about kind of GBV in the specific context, but just to say we have now gone through kind of in each country our planning phase, like food security has also done, and we're our initial figures are around 90 million people in need of GBV prevention and response support next year, and that's quite a significant increase from last year. And I'm also happy that we're together for the 16 days of activism, and I wanted to note also on Monday we saw ERC Fletcher as well in Sudan, at least in UNFPA, that was all over, and how he was part of the celebrations in Sudan and talking about the voices of women and the protection of women and girls and gender-based violence and the sexual violence happening there. So yes, it's a shame we are still here talking about it. I think we will continue to be here and talking about it together for quite a long time. But for us, it's always very reassuring when we have other partners like WFP, like the ERC, also raising this issue. Also, in terms of food security, I know we're here to talk about economic empowerment, but I think for us, it's been important as well. There seems to be a stronger recognition of the links between violence, conflict, and GBV and sexual violence in different forms. And then I think we're here today to talk more about the lack of access to resources, or the impact of all kinds of disasters and crises in exacerbating those needs for GBV prevention and response. So economic empowerment is a significant, important strategy to reduce the impact of GBV and to prevent GBV longer term. It is not something that is a specialization of the GBV community. So it's really, we're happy to be here today to talk with those, the food security actors, and those of you who are more active in economic empowerment and livelihoods, because it is really a big part of the response, and it's something that we very often see missing, in the sense that it's not always something easy to put in place straight away in a humanitarian crisis. Sometimes it's seen as a longer term, but yes, ideally from the beginning of the crisis, it can really reduce the risks. So maybe I should say a little bit about the more concrete ways that it intersects the economic empowerment and GBV. The economic empowerment can help GBV survivors in rebuilding their lives, and it can also be an entry point for getting information about the existing services, the rights and resources of survivors. When women can access resources directly through a livelihood, through a salary, through economic empowerment, they are less likely to be manipulated or coerced into harmful situations. And this can be trafficking, exploitation, and we know that this increases during crisis. Economic empowerment gives women the ability to support themselves and their families, and then reducing that reliance on potentially abusive partners or family members. So in cases of intimate partner violence, that we also know is a big issue in humanitarian crisis and during stress, Women's direct access to economic resources can help women and girls being able to leave or regain their independence or get away from the abuse. And it's not, of course, it's not just about partners, it's about community members. It's also about the aid sector, right? And how economic empowerment can also reduce the risk of sexual exploitation and abuse by the aid sector and aid workers. Economic empowerment does not just give access to better medical care, legal assistance, psychosocial support. It also can allow women to move away from a crisis, away from a protection risk, and to seek help and protection elsewhere. So it does also increase the capacities to seek help. It improves women's self-esteem and confidence, making it easier to resist coercive and violent situations. I would also say at a community level, when women are empowered, and during these programs, we can create networks of women who can then, and I think we'll hear about that today, who can then engage and really help in psychosocial support for other women in creating social protection, as well as advocacy and creating a change at a legal level, at a normative level over time. So I think that social network, that community level empowerment that can also result from economic empowerment models are very important. I think I'm looking a bit at the time because I know there are many, and maybe we should, that's enough to set the scene about why it's important, and then it's better to have time to have examples or discuss later on. So thanks.
Thank you, Astrid, and thanks for also mentioning the ERC's really strong message coming directly from him in Sudan, kicking off the 16 days. I think that was really encouraging to see him taking this as part of his new mandate with real leadership. And great overview of the importance of this intersect and how you're seeing this in humanitarian settings. I really liked also this idea of even supporting capacity to seek help, something I hadn't really sort of thought about, but that's really important. I want to turn now to Swati. And ask her a little bit about a question that relates to the work that WFP does with our digital financial inclusion and cash-based transfers. And I know that you, Swati, have been doing some work looking specifically at this for cash-based transfers and also government social protection programs. And I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about this, how you see this correlation between women's economic empowerment and these social protection and humanitarian programs and GBV, and hear a little bit from your experience.
Sure. Yes. Can you hear me, Brenda? Perfect. Yeah, thank you first of all for inviting me to this panel, and it's a privilege to be sharing insights on this very critical topic and helping amplify it. And I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists, and I'll try to bring in more of because we did some research for in the context of what WFP does for cash transfers early last year, and we looked at the existing evidence and also consulted experts. And the aim was to understand how to address unintended risk in cash transfer programming. So I'll kind of try to bring some structure to what Astrid was already sharing. And for examples, I'll turn to my fellow panelists, Peter and Noor, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from them on what has been their experience in the field. So what does the evidence actually say? And there has been quite a lot of rigorous research on this topic across countries in Latin America, Africa, Asia. And for this study, we looked at a meta-analysis of various studies that have happened across these countries. And these studies found that there has been mainly a decline in IPV, and IPV is what we focus. So we primarily looked at the link with intimate partner violence rather than broader gender-based violence. and by intimate partner, we mean violence, the risk of violence from intimate partners or other family members of the women. So we mainly looked at IPV among the existing evidence, and we saw that research points to a decline in the risk of IPV with cash transfers. For instance, a review of 22 studies found that about 16 of them reported reductions in IPV with cash transfer interventions, while the rest of them showed mixed or no effect. Let me unpack a bit briefly. So evidence shows that there are three key pathways through which cash transfers influence IPV, and this can, like I said, help give structure to the kind of experiences that Astrid was sharing. The first pathway is where with the influx of cash, there is a reduction in poverty-related financial stress and negative coping strategies, which then actually improve emotional well-being and economic security. So this helps to lower intimate partner violence or the risk of intimate partner violence. The second pathway is through the impact of cash on intra-household dynamics. So when cash, and especially cash given to women, it can better help to meet the needs of the households and increase women's role in the decision making, and thereby reduce IPV, but it may also provoke backlash, especially in context where gender norms are relatively rigid and major shifts in power dynamics within the households would be less accepted. And the third pathway is where cash transfers can enhance women's financial control and autonomy, enabling them to assert preferences or even leave abusive relationships, thereby reducing IPV risk. However, these changes can sometimes also threaten partners and thereby increase IPV risk. So these three pathways highlight this kind of dual potential of cash transfers to reduce or exacerbate IPV. And this depends on the context, the implementation of the program design, and the complementary interventions. Now here I would like for us to consider two key questions. The first, does the evidence talk about the role of gender of the recipient? Does the gender of the recipient actually matter? And if you see along the first pathway, where there is influx of cash and due to the income effect, there would be a reduction in IPV. This would happen regardless of gender. In fact, a study in Kenya found that reduction was greater when women received cash, especially for physical and sexual kind of violence. Yet risk may remain along the second and the third pathways because they are more complex, and there is lack of evidence in that context. And the second question is, how can these reductions, even if they are reductions in IPV, how can they be sustained beyond the program? So any reductions due to income effect may not last post-program, right? So this wouldn't happen unless there are complementary interventions for transforming the harmful gender norms and also for supporting overall well-being, not just for the household, but rather for the community. For example, in Bangladesh, which is where there has been like a longer study to even understand the post-program impacts of a cash transfer program. It found that IPV reductions lasted only when cash transfers were paired with behavior change communication, which involved men, women, as well as the community. Another program in Nigeria, a study found that cash transfers when cash transfers were combined with community livelihood project, IPV reduced, but cash transfers alone or community livelihood projects alone did not have any effect on IPV. And finally, what's important to look at is context, because context really plays a very important role here. In conservative or conflict-affected settings where shifts in gender roles can challenge traditional norms, the risk of backlash might be higher. Yet it's in these very contexts that empowering women through cash transfers is critical, as WFP's experience also shows. So pairing them with norms transformative interventions, which are identified through thorough risk and social norms assessment, becomes very important here. And by norms transformative intervention, I mean involving men and communities, having programs around intra-household dialogues, financial literacy, making sure that the way the transfers are delivered are in a way that it's informed by norms, as well as there are safeguards in place to protect women against any kind of abuse. Yeah, I would stop there and see, Brenda, if you have any further thoughts or questions for me.
No, that's great, Swati. That's a whole lot of information in a very short period of time, but incredibly, I think, pertinent also to the work that WFP does, and just really stressing also the importance of understanding what we're doing, knowing that cash alone is actually not going to necessarily be the response that is needed for us to safely prioritize women and to support them in terms of their own economic empowerment journey, and that also, recognizing that our support comes in a particular time where humanitarian circumstances may mean that things are shifting, but there's also a danger of backlash and things shifting even further back in the future. And so all of this context and the need to really carefully manage the risk, but also understand that it's an absolute opportunity. So super helpful. I did want to go now then back to sort of looking a little bit more at WFP and ask Peter to come in and give us a little bit of a sense in DRC, where of course we've all heard about these really alarmingly high rates of gender-based violence and the conflict there. And also this lack of livelihoods, which also, of course, means that people are taking some very difficult decisions and desperate measures. But I wanted to hear a little bit from you, Peter. How much of this discussion that you're hearing so far resonates with you in terms of this intersect of economic empowerment and GBV and your experience there in Goma, but also throughout the whole country in DRC?
Well, thank you, Brenda, and distinguished panelists. Yes, as Valerie said in her opening remarks, one of the primary causes of gender-based violence in DRC is actually the legacy of conflict and instability that has exacerbated the existing gender inequalities and led to widespread impunity. In 2023 alone, GBV actors here identified over 120,000 cases, 98% of which were among women and girls. And 2/3 of these occurred in the conflict areas, particularly in North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri. In the first semester of 2024, the GBV caseload already exceeded 61,000. However, it is really impossible to show an actual scale of gender-based violence here. There are challenges in capturing the data, as many of the victims do not report due to the stigma attached to fear of retaliation. Sometimes also lack of awareness and lack of GBV response services. In DRC, the protracted conflict and displacement has disrupted the livelihoods of over 7 million people. These families have lost access to land and productive access, and with the loss of the livelihoods having a particularly aggravating impact on women. I think Valerie also mentioned how the crucial role that women play in the food security sector. In DRC, they produce 75% of food in the rural areas. And traditionally, women also sell agricultural produce in the local markets, generating income. The loss of livelihoods, therefore, due to conflict and displacement, puts millions of people under immense pressure to find alternative ways to put food on the family table. And this results in high reliance on negative coping strategies. Early this year, WFP published a study showcasing how the activity of collecting firewood poses great risk for GBV. In this study, 60% of the participants indicated that the collection of firewood, often done to earn an income, poses a risk of sexual assault to the girls and women who are involved in it. This prevalence of sexual violence is very high, and it accounts for 60% of GBV cases in 2023. Another negative consequence of food insecurity and lack of access to livelihoods is that women and girls are forced into survival sex, early or forced marriages, or just sexual exploitation. In the areas affected by displacement, we see a proliferation of what is called here maisons de tolérance, which are simply brothels. Over 1,000 of them exist in these areas. And in these brothels, even minors are sexually abused and exploited due to rampant levels of poverty and lack of livelihoods. Some parents or guardians send their adolescent girls to perform sex in order to meet household needs, contributing to the high levels of sexual abuse and exploitation of children. So all these survival mechanisms really increase the exposure of women and girls to various types of GBV, including rape, sexual violence, physical violence, psychological violence, the denial of resources and opportunities, and they pose enormous risks in terms of sexual and reproductive health as well. I'm recently talking to a third-time victim of rape. He said now when they go out to fetch firewood, they carry condoms with them. I'll stop there, Brenda, just to give you an idea of what we have to face here.
Thanks, Peter. That's a really sobering and difficult situation that we know that in WFP we're trying to see where some of our programs could obviously try to bring a little bit of solutions to what are incredibly pressing needs. And that last story that you just told is going to remain with me for quite some time, and I'm sure all of our listeners are sort of feeling that very heavily now. I wanted to turn now to Noor, who has joined us, and we're hoping we didn't have a chance to connect and do a little test of your audio, but we see you very well. Noor, we wanted to hear from you. What role do you think that women-led organizations in particular can play in this intersect between gender-based violence and food security? Over to you.
Thank you, Brenda. Can you hear me?
We hear you very well.
Yes, that is a test, actually. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me today. It's truly an honor to be part of this discussion alongside such inspiring panelists, and for creating a space to highlight the critical link between women's economic empowerment and the fight to end violence against women and girls. I'm really excited to share the insights of our work at Baghdad Women Association, and more specifically from the field implementation of the Call to Action initiative, which is CAFI project, and to learn from all of you, of course. To answer your question, women-led organizations are truly at the center of addressing challenges like GBV and women's economic empowerment, because they so connect to the communities they serve. And these organizations bring a deep understanding of local needs to cultural contexts, which is crucial for creating solutions that actually work. And they also play several important roles. First, they amplify the voices of women and girls, making sure their needs are not just heard, but prioritized. And they also create opportunities for women to build resilience. whether that's through economic empowerment programs, safe spaces, or community awareness campaigns, and of course, advocate for those who. And because they are rooted in their communities, they are able to challenge harmful social norms and advocate for gender equality in ways that feel authentic and sustainable. In countries like Iraq, where crises can deepen vulnerabilities, women-led organizations are really the bridge between what is happening on the ground and the large global goals we are, or of course, working towards. They don't just address the issues, they empower women to take leadership roles to create lasting change. Over to you, dear.
Thank you so much, Noor, and really resonating with me, this issue of being able to support authentic and sustainable challenges to social norms and in these specific contexts is really sort of the main one of the main advantages that I see for women-led organizations. And we're really I think in the entire humanitarian sphere really still too far back in terms of working together in really more equitable partnerships. So in WFP, we're certainly looking to strengthen that and see clearly how that will bring support for the people that we're jointly trying to assist. I know also that you have done, work with your call to action in emergencies, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that and sort of that link to economic empowerment. We've heard from some of the other panelists about both the fact that there's evidence that this is an important connection and it is an opportunity to look at how we reduce, in particular, intimate partner violence, but also perhaps gender-based violence at large. But wanted to hear a little bit more specifically about your experience with your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. But as part of the Call to Action Field Implementation CAFI project, our role at Baghdad Women Association is to really take what can sometimes feel like abstract global commitments and make them tangible at the community level. And one of the key ways we do that is by building the capacity of those WLOs. And we work with them to strengthen their ability to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. But we also ensure they are equipped to address the root causes of this violence, economic inequality being a big one of those, as other panelists already said. And for economic empowerment is such a crucial piece here. When women have financial independence, they are better able to make decisions about their own lives, support their families, and even leave unsafe environments. But we've also learned that empowerment needs to come with safeguards, because in some cases it can challenge existing power dynamics and increase risks and that's why our work focuses on finding that balance, empowering women while addressing the risks. And through CAFI, we are also creating a space for those women-led organizations to connect and share their experience and influence the large humanitarian system. And it's not just about preventing violence. It's about ensuring that women's leadership in front and center in rebuilding the transforming their communities. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, over to you.
Super, thanks, Noor. I wanted to perhaps come back to Peter and Astrid on a couple of things, and then we'll open up for a bit more of a conversation with some of the questions that are coming into the chat. But before we do that, Peter, I was just wondering, based on your experience there in DRC, can you tell us a little bit about how WFP partners with more specialized agencies, recognizing we have, of course, strength in food security and nutrition, but we also seek to have the expertise of specialized agencies. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of how that works for you?
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Yes, let me try. I'm going to use a couple of different partners that we work with to try and give you some feeling of what we're doing here. You may have heard of the Panzi Foundation, led by the Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Denis Mukwege. We work through a referral pathway with their hospital to provide food and nutrition to GBV survivors who receive treatment in the school and also who get some training in rehabilitation training through the foundation. We support socioeconomic integration by linking them to our resilience activities as well. For instance, in the process of targeting for resilience projects in South Kivu, we ensure that people checking out of the hospital and returning to areas covered by the project are also included in the project. We have a field level agreement now with Panzi Foundation, which helps us to not only conduct GBV audit, safety audits, but we train stakeholders on GBV, including WFP partners. We do community mobilization on GBV. We provide support for case management in GBV incidents related to WFP activities in areas where there are no responders. In camps and displaced sites, we have a good example of working with UNFPA in a project which was partly funded by headquarters. This project benefits about 250 women and girls in Bulengo, where UNFPA has created sort of a safe space for women. But lastly, another case which I'd like to use is, I like to refer to is probably what we do with a cooperative called Tungana, which is a local association that has been working with women and girls for a while. And we support them in providing training and skills such as sewing and literacy skills for these displaced women. But what is really important to take away from here is when you listen to the women, they say, the skills that they learn, you cannot take away from them, they say. Whether they are displaced, whether they are violated in any form, wherever they go, they can rebuild their lives because they have learned a skill. And the second thing that they tell you always is that now they know that you must always have a saving. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And certainly that's very powerful. When you have skills and when you have knowledge, people cannot take that away from you. And that's a super important part of what we're trying to do, I think, in this intersect and connection with our cash and GBV and food security. I want to come back, Astrid. We've heard from you in the very beginning, and we wanted to come back to a little bit. And also, I think tied to some of the things that we've heard, that there are also mixed results that are possible from some of this work. And indeed, we heard also about potential backlash, and that could even lead to increases in GBV and in particular for intimate partner violence, particularly horrifying. Can you tell us what you think are some of the more important considerations for humanitarian actors to take into account so that we ensure that we don't have these mixed results, that we have the right results, the one we're looking for?
Thank you, Brenda. I think, there are several considerations. I mean, first, I think it shouldn't stop us from doing. So I think sometimes in the GBV community, we talk so much about risk that we end up almost paralyzing others, I think. So But there are real risks and there are real considerations in doing it the right way. And I think it was very clearly articulated by Swati, Noor, and Peter. So I think the first is that need for a real gender analysis. And when you do the gender risk analysis, that you bring in organizations such as Noor's Baghdadi Women's Association, in terms of understanding the risks and understanding what is socially acceptable, what could be, really understanding the context economically, culturally, in terms of gender equality and the needs and wishes of women in terms of what kind of activities. And then including women and girls in program design as well, right? There's one important principle, and that is to never single out GBV survivors for interventions. So they shouldn't be the sole participant. It shouldn't be announced that they are accessing cash assistance because they have been victims of rape, for example. That would put them at great risk at many different levels. So it's about how to target with programs in economic empowerment as part of bigger groups without being exposed or segregated, right? I also think we were talking about including women and women's voices, which is super important. And then I agree with the other panelists. There's also the element of bringing in the community and men. And when you do cash assistance or livelihoods programming, to have kind of discussions for us, whether it's psychosocial support or bringing in other parts of the community or family around what it means in terms of power or decision. So the others talked about the kind of inter-family conflicts and the intimate partner violence risks, etc., that are true about control, changes in dynamics. So we have to be careful that those potential changes don't exacerbate the risk. And then there's issues around community backlash as well, where Noor and others can be very helpful in actually understanding what are the economic activities that are more acceptable for young girls, for example. I know when I was working in Palestine and Syria, there are a lot of women in the pharmacies at the desk. There are less women who find it safe or whose relatives maybe find it safe for them to be in some of the backroom work where you're more hidden, right? So there are all these different elements. And then I think there's that we're careful that we don't overburden women. I don't think that's a risk in cash, but if it is more kind of vocational training or livelihoods that demands or microfinance where you take on new professional role, right? To also think, well, for female-headed households, they might already be the caregiver. They might already be fetching the firewood, which has its own risk. They might already be responsible for farming or getting food on the table. So sometimes we might be blind to that and kind of think women are the solution for everything, and then actually aggravate or the traditional roles that they already have or overburden. I think there's also sometimes just being aware of new risks of exploitation. I know in Syria there's been discussions around cash, how again female-headed household, if others know that they receive cash assistance, then the paying of monthly rent and the whole pressure sometimes to pay and how to use those funds become very difficult, more difficult than if you in a way have in-kind assistance. But I think basically it's about including, right? Including the women themselves and thinking it through with communities, with having male allies and having our ears and eyes open and working together so that we do things in a way that can really be positive and change and provide the protection for women and girls at different levels. Thank you.
Thanks, Astrid. Do I see we're getting a little bit tighter on time. I did want to pick up a couple of the questions. We might not be able to go through all of them, but a couple of the questions coming in from the chat, and I wanted to refer one of them to Noor first. And Noor, this is really a question about, and picks up a little bit where Astrid was leaving off, also in terms of male allies and the community engagement, making sure we do that right. How do you see that organizations can really better involve these male allies and communities to support this work on economic empowerment and reduction of GBV hand in hand? Have you seen particular things that work in the context in which you're working in? Over to you.
Well, thank you, Brenda. And I wanna, this question comes actually in the right time, where I would highlight our current efforts and project in collaboration with WFP, actually, and that is actually engaging male allies and communities as a crucial to supporting women's economic empowerment and reducing gender-based violence. And we've saw that and how this approach can create meaningful change through the project we are already starting as the She Can project. And this initiative focuses on gender sensitization at both the household and the community level, and multiple governorates in Iraq, which is Baghdad, Karbala, and Basra. And we are conducting workshops and training sessions, not just for women, but also for their families and community members, including men. And actually, we are specifically targeting men to become active allies in addressing violence and promoting economic opportunities for those women. And one example is our community engagement sessions, where we would work with local leaders and male participants to explore how supporting women's empowerment benefits the entire community. And these sessions would highlight the shared responsibility in reducing violence and advancing economic independence. And by engaging both men and women, we are not only addressing immediate challenge, but also laying the groundwork for long-term cultural and social change, of course. And I believe that projects like She Can show that when communities come together to support women's rights, the ripple effects are transformative, not just for women, but for everyone in the community. Over to you, and I hope I answered your question here. Thank you.
Thanks, Noor. No, really, really important. And also in terms of what we're seeing of sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back, and then forward again, right? And we see that in many countries. So laying that groundwork for long term is really important. I wanted to go to Swati on a question on the financial abuse working group. Can you tell us a little bit more, like how was that set up? How does it help practitioners understand responsibilities around women's access to financial services and mitigating GBV risk?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Brenda, for bringing that up, actually, because as I was hearing all of you, I was thinking in connection to cash transfers in GBV and where actually cash is transferred using formal financial institutions. A lot of that now becoming digital, which means high tech, low touch. So actually a large part of the experience of receiving cash for these women is being outsourced to another third party in this case, right? So these are financial institutions. So how do you actually get them interested in this? And they are private sector players. They need to have a business case and everything. So how to actually get them interested in addressing this issue in terms of making sure that any risk, increased risk to GBV or IPV is mitigated, and that there are also ways in which they can respond in case there are such cases of GBV seen in the field, and at the same time ensuring that they don't see it as a must do because they are working with a humanitarian partner and these are humanitarian principles they must follow, but rather see it as a real risk, as well as a risk to be addressed because their systems or their product might be misused to create harm to the end clients, and at the same time see it as an opportunity to better serve the women clients as well. And this is the context within which we've been working with the working group on financial abuse within Finequity. And Finequity, as you would know, is a community of practice, and we have about 9,000 practitioners, researchers, and from across the sector working on financial inclusion and women's economic empowerment. And we found that within the different types of gender-based violence, financial abuse is one where which becomes relevant for financial institutions. And by financial abuse, I mean where money is used to control another person's financial resources, and this could include income, savings, debt, access to financial services as well. And so just to give a quick example is where the husband uses the wife's phone to monitor her transactions because now she's receiving SMS on her phone for her online banking or for her digital banking, or maybe coerces her to share the PIN card, or even in case of microfinance, coerce the partner to take debt while refusing to help with repayments, right? So you would see these examples include the use of financial services, which are not designed to create these unintended harms, but might end up creating those harms. So this is where it presents a risk which can be addressed by financial institutions, as well as, like I said, an opportunity to remove the barriers related to gender norms, so that more women can use these financial products. So that has been the context within which the working group has been getting together. And we have come up with a working definition of financial abuse based on a lot of work that has been happening in UK and Australia. And we're also putting together a learning agenda. And what is needed now is more action research with financial institutions and in different contexts, because the experience would really vary from one country to the other. And some of the links were shared in the chat earlier, so the audience can go over there, and we have a few blogs. We have quite a few blogs written on this topic as well, which could give you more information.
Great, many thanks, Swati. That was really interesting also to understand better financial abuse and that actual term and what it means, and probably a risk that in our own programs we need to more clearly understand. I know we're running up against the hour, so I'm going to try and wrap us up here. It's pretty sobering, I think, to start with the idea of a woman being killed every 10 minutes and realize that we have spoken for 60 minutes. And so that means that 6 women have been killed by their partner or family member. But I will take away so many rich observations and information from this discussion, probably too many to even name here, but clearly everyone is very much understanding these linkages, and I think that's already a step forward for all these different players to be really understanding these linkages, but also thinking through the pathways, thinking through the context, thinking through not only risks, but also opportunities. Taking away very clear messages around the fact that the things that we can do make a difference. And really, I will also remember very, very much that idea of you can't take away skills and knowledge regardless of what you do to a person. And I think that's an exciting sort of uplifting kind of note to end on, knowing that we all have a lot to do with a lot of different people, including the communities and men and boys, and also really engaging the local women-led organizations where that sustainable and authentic challenge can really be brought to bear. But thank you so much to everyone, but especially to our amazing panelists for such great conversations and such great learning from all of you. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.